I'd like to welcome everybody to this next presentation in the series of Community of Practice webinars. The purpose of these webinars is to offer practitioners of concepts and methods associated with risk-informed and performance-based approaches. We call them RIPB approaches, related to implementing nuclear technology and evaluating its safety. We offer them a chance to share their knowledge and experience. The Risk-Informed Performance-Based Principles and Policy Committee of the ANS has been putting on these events for the past 3 years, and presentations are available to the public on the ANS website, as Pat just mentioned. There are now about 40 such recordings available. The purpose of RP3C is to help modernize ANS standards. The Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, we call it NEMA, passed in 2019, associates modernization with application of RIPB approaches. There's growing realization within the nuclear community that conventional, prescriptive, and deterministic approaches are not going to support increasing use of nuclear technology to play its rightful role for the benefit of society. Socializing alternative approaches could drive changes in industry and regulatory practice. ANS offers the COP files on its website to serve as a knowledge repository of the experience from a wide range of practitioners in the field. We hope that more people will use this knowledge base to speed up needed changes in the state of the art and in the state of practice. These events are generally scheduled for the last Friday of a month. Today, I will be the one making the presentation, but I'm not going to be presenting as chair of RP3C, which I am, but as a practitioner of RIPB approaches. We are going to be talking about ANS-30.3, of which I am a member of the working group. But again, I'm not going to be speaking as representing ANS-30.3 working group. I'm making this presentation primarily so that it will foster discussion and perhaps debate as the standard ANS 30.3 comes into use. Next slide. So this presentation is essentially describing a case-specific application of ANS 30.3 and the technology-inclusive, risk-informed, and performance-based principles that it has. The standard states upfront that it has technology-neutral elements, but it doesn't necessarily spell it out in a way that is easily recognizable. But the user of the standard can easily, I think, decipher where these elements are because of the decision-making framework that it contains. And so we'll try to cover that in the presentation. And this decision-making framework uses an objectives hierarchy and risk management concepts in order to implement the standard. There's a high-level architecture that then comes through, which is definitely technology inclusive. And then I also hope to show how these ideas can be actually used in an application for under Part 52, 10 CFR Part 52, on the basis of a technology that is the molten fuel, molten salt reactor design. And then I'd like to summarize the value of the standard as a voluntary consensus standard. Next slide. So ANS 30.3 is a voluntary consensus standard in the traditional sense that it has requirements. What is different is that the requirements in the standard are explicitly risk-informed and performance-based. And, you know, this distinguishes it in terms of applying it to light water reactors and especially new light water reactors. This slide shows where these requirements are identified in the standard. They occur primarily in the sections shown at the bottom of the slide. But the emphasis is that this offers requirements that are considered to be a minimum set for each of the topic areas covered in the standard and are to be applied through the whole design development process and phase. Next slide. So a key requirement of ANS 30.3 is that the user establish a decision analysis process. So why is that needed? Well, that's what it takes to identify technical alternatives, identify and evaluate alternative courses of action, record the preferences that are expressed in the various decisions that are taken, document the decision rationale and the assumptions that go into the decisions. So all this is spelled out in section 11 of the standard, performance-based decision making. Now, the other sections are then implemented towards achieving nuclear licensing success based on this process that has been set up. The decisions that are associated with use of the standard occur at various levels. In other words, the requirements are not all considered to be at the same level, but they occur at, let's say, the project level decisions where it covers unique technologies of the project. These are the plant level design features, the site characteristics, and you know, the whole project as a whole. The plant level design features would be a subset, and they would represent the nuclear steam supply system, the secondary side systems, the support systems, etc. Now, the purpose of setting up this whole decision analysis process is to achieve project success, and the standard itself makes it a point to say that optimal decisions using systems engineering best practices, considering the whole project life cycle, is really what it takes. But it doesn't dictate or prescribe how that decision making mechanism is put into practice in any given organization. So the standard can be used as as a way to incorporate whatever is the mechanism that a given project has set up. Now, a part of this project is, of course, the reactor product that is the central feature of this project that we are talking about. Now, the reactor product itself is something where the requirements would optimize diverse performance objectives, and these would include safety, economics, environment, etc. But in terms of the specific requirements in the standard, what we are aiming for is a subset directed towards nuclear licensing success. So what we are talking about is a flow down where you begin at the project level, go down to the plant level, and then to the reactor product, and then to the licensing itself. So next slide. So this slide revisits these ideas, but it expresses them as a way to use a hierarchical arrangement of performance objectives. And this is, again, what is described in section 11 and is used in all the other sections. And the key is that a distinction is made between the reactor product and the overall set of design activities that necessarily includes lots of other considerations. A further distinction is made between the safety design and the licensing of the product itself. Next slide. This is just a simplistic representation of how the regulatory requirements and the conformance with the performance objectives of the regulations is really a small part of the overall project. Next slide. So the idea expressed over here is that the regulations themselves offer plenty of flexibility. The current LWR licensing process that is used for the operating plants, the operating fleet, and for which there is demonstrated high levels of safety. The way the regulations have been implemented, the general feeling is that it doesn't necessarily offer all that much flexibility. But I suggest that that is because the way the regulatory practice has evolved has made the implementation of the regulations really rather prescriptive. Now, I think it is, as a result of a lot of the rethinking about the effectiveness of our current regulatory framework, and the growing recognition of RIPB approaches, it is clear that for a lot of the things that are now valued with the operating fleet, such as power up rates, license renewal, life extension, these RIPB approaches can offer significant economic benefits. In fact, last year in August of 2023, Lana Lawrence of INL made a presentation identifying such opportunities. But really, the flexibility of the regulations, I think, can be used to maximum benefit with respect to non-light water reactor applications using regulatory modernization. So, what I've tried to show in this slide is the whole regulatory framework broken down into the regulations and guidance that cover the format and content. Where are the technical requirements? These are in parts 20, 50, 51, 54, 100. The administrative requirements, 221, 52, 110, 170, and 171, and the technical guidance. Now, I've tried to include in here very recent activities related to the advanced reactor content of application and the technology inclusive content of application projects also. And those would be the regulatory guides 1.253, but it's also covered in regulatory guide 1.233. So all these taken together suggest offers a lot of flexibility for LWR, for new LWRs, but also for non-LWRs. And these can be employed to accomplish the objectives relative to defining safety requirements, selecting licensing basis events, documenting the safety analysis and the design basis, documenting a PRA, considering severe accident analyses, classifying and categorizing SSCs, and evaluating defense in depth systematically. Now, this covers a lot, but it's still not exhaustive. But the standard can be quite useful in terms of the actual development of requirements specific to a given project and a reactor and the licensing of that reactor. Next slide. So the regulatory the regulations themselves can be looked at in terms of the outcomes that they aim to that they aim to accomplish. So one can look at the technology inclusive outcome objectives for the licensing process. For example, implementing 10 CFR Part 50, right in the introduction, it says that the general design criteria are generally considered applicable to other types of nuclear power units. And, it was looked at that way at the beginning, but it evolved into being rather prescriptive in a number of areas. Now, more recently, the commission really, as part of its reform process, issued a white paper, that is the SRM to SECI 98-144, where it actually directed the staff to consider risk-informed performance-based approaches and identified the high-level outcome objectives, associated with success in these in implementing these approaches. Now, after the commission issued that, it took about 20 years, really, but that's when the staff prepared and the commission approved use of performance-based approaches relative to the design criteria for the containment function. And this was the SECI 180096 that proposed a methodology for non-LWR designers to define functional containment performance criteria using RIPB approaches. So the point is that these functional containment performance criteria, as well as other performance criteria and outcome objectives in the regulations, can be proposed for a given technology and a given design by the applicant to be accomplished using the Commission's direction in SRM to SECI 98-144. And ANS 30.3 provides a generalized basis for alternatives to be proposed. Now, the thing is that it took a lot of interaction between the staff and the commission before this change in the prescriptive approach to the containment function came about. But it seems like one doesn't need to have to go through that kind of lengthy interaction if the arguments that are presented to make a risk-informed performance-based approach work it can be applied to all the design criteria in Part 50 or any other principal design criteria that may be proposed. But this would take the formulation of the arguments for a safety case and to be presented with adequate technical justification. So next slide. Let's see, at this point, I don't know if Kent Welter is on the line. I'm moving on to the next phase of this, but if Kent is on, I'd like to see if he has anything to say. Kent is the chair of the ANS 30.3 working group. And, as I say, I have made this, prepared these slides representing the standard, and I'd like to give him an opportunity if he has any comments. But okay, in terms of the questions that are in the chat, I'll try to get to them at the end. Okay, moving on to the next segment of the presentation. So this generalized architecture that I'm trying to describe, offers requirements management using the objectives hierarchy concept. The requirements management part of it is really important because it is the process of documenting, analyzing, tracking, verifying requirements, and that's what really is a key part of implementing a systems engineering process. The objectives-driven structure for the reactor product really enables this set of the structure and the processes that will enable individual performance objectives to be discretely treated in such a way that you can have assurance of accomplishing those objectives. And, as is shown in the standard, these requirements occur in a hierarchy where you go down from the plant level, system, subsystem, etc., in this kind of a flow down. And in a previous presentation on the community of practice, this idea of having a hierarchical arrangement that is based on the mission of the project, the customer requirements. So all these sorts of the requirements can be formally incorporated into this approach of requirements management. Next slide. So the idea of having this hierarchy actually implies another another factor that quite frequently is not very explicitly stated, and that is that there is a difference in the level of detail that's associated with the performance objectives in a requirements hierarchy. So this kind of a structure of performance objectives is what I would call a framework, and this is the decision-making framework that's at the an integral part of ANS-30.3. I would call any framework to be a representation of the relationships and dependencies among the specified elements. And in this case, what we are talking about are the performance objectives, representing the various aspects of the project and incorporated into this formal decision analysis process. So, employing a formal way of establishing these requirements and evaluating the options and tracking and integrating the requirements is enabled by having this kind of a framework where you have the objectives decomposed into elements in such a way that the higher level objective is accomplished by fulfilling the lower level objectives. But what this implies is that the higher level objectives don't express the requirements in with a lot of detail. So the level of detail is low at the top and it increases as you go down in this hierarchy. So setting this up in a formal way is what enables ANS 30.3 to show that a formal safety case can be made for each of the topics that are covered in the standard. Next slide. One of the important things in looking at how the performance objectives within a hierarchy would work is to examine in closer detail the relationship between the criterion, between the requirement, the criterion, and the performance objective. So I suggest that a requirement is a basic element with which a designer interacts with the rest of the project. So it is what establishes the interface between what the designer does and fulfilling the functional purposes of the project. For example, a high-level requirement could be to demonstrate the feasibility of a nuclear heat source in place of a coal-powered heat source. But if you go through the formal process of a requirements hierarchy, then you would decompose that down into the lower levels where you would eventually get down from the functions to the systems to the components. And at the component level, the requirement may begin with as a baseline that all the components be chosen as off-the-shelf items. Now, this doesn't mean that the final design will only have off-the-shelf items. It just means that wherever there are increased performance requirements, for whatever the reason that are important to the project, you improve the performance by what are these days called special treatment requirements. So you modify the requirements in that way. And to show how that changes, you use the criteria associated with the performance parameters associated with each of the objectives. So a criterion is the level of one or a set of parameters that establishes the limit state for acceptance of a given system. So this, the whole set of activities that come together is then the performance objective, which is one element of the framework that we are talking about. Next slide. So this idea is expressed in this slide, and let me just take a minute to show at least what this represents. The blue curve over there is a representation of the system attributes that enables the system to meet its performance objective. The red curve is a representation of the various states of the system, the operating states, which go from normal operation to some design basis event where the state changes physically as a function of time. So the safety margin in a performance-based approach is defined as the difference between a point on the red curve to the line that is set as the performance criterion. Now, the important thing is to achieve success for the performance objective. There needs to be a safety margin, that is the difference between a point on the red curve to the criterion that has been set. So as long as that is a positive quantity, that shows that there is a positive margin available. And in the way that, the structure has been set up in ANS-30.3, the uncertainties are considered as a likelihood of being either right or wrong in the proposition that there will always be a positive margin available between the red curve and the performance criterion. Pat, can you show how that red curve can begin at the left and then move to the right? Yeah, there you go. So, the idea is to have a design to have design constraints so that there will always be a positive margin between the load and the performance criterion. Next slide. Let's see this. Okay, so I'm getting into the let's just cover, because we're already well into the talk. I was going to offer, if we had time, a chance to discuss these things, but let me try to get through the whole presentation, and then we'll address the questions. So moving on to the potential application of these ideas into an actual application. This slide shows a notional objectives hierarchy for a molten salt reactor. And I'm thinking about a molten fuel, molten salt reactor. The objectives hierarchy shown over here was actually part of a community of practice presentation way back in July of 2022. And it uses the structure that is documented in NUREG BR 0303, Guidance for Performance-Based Regulation. So again, this is just showing how the various elements of the framework that we've been talking about can offer requirements to each of the boxes shown over here, so that you can accomplish the higher level objectives of reactor safety, radiation safety, and safeguards. This can be done in a formal way and demonstrated for purposes of a safety case. Next slide. Now, at the next level of detail, we can envision a Part 52 application for a design certification using a deterministic and performance-based approach. What Part 52 envisions is that there will be a rule-making that is based on a safety analysis report that's prepared by an applicant. And in this case, it would be Part 5247, which requires that the safety case propose principal design criteria and show the relationship between the principal design criteria and the design bases. So ANS 30.3 can be used to actually develop the requirements using sections 4, 5, and 6 to specify the design basis events and show that the SSEs will meet the limiting challenges. And this notional application, will need to consider beyond design basis events as well as the defense in depth. And that's where sections 8, 9, and 10 can be used to develop the requirements. And section 7 on the PRA, because we are talking about a deterministic approach, the PRA would be used as a basis for confirmation that the risk management for this application can be implemented using a fit-for-purpose PRA. Next slide. So this is again a pictorial of defense in depth. This has been used before, but the basic idea is that these what people refer to as levels of defense or layers of defense can be addressed using the structure provided in ANS 30.3. Next slide. So in summary, ANSI ANS 30.3 is a voluntary consensus standard, and it is really able to address many significant needs relative to non-LWR application, and can be used in the same way that many other standards developed by other standards developing organizations are used. It provides the architecture for a decision-making framework, and it can address input information at various levels of detail, depending on whether you're at the conceptual level or more mature design levels. Now, the decision-making structures are connected, and I use the analogy of scaffolding to connect all the various pieces in a formal way, and keep track of all the decisions that are taken throughout the life of the project. And it certainly, as part of the performance-based approach, you can take account of the physical and temporal margins available to accomplish the performance objectives. And the last point is that ANS 30.3 can be really a factor in claiming that progress has been made towards meeting the Nuclear Energy Innovation and Modernization Act, as well as the federal direction, with respect to using voluntary consensus standards in a performance-based manner. So, this is the end of my presentation. Let's see, I haven't been following the questions. Pat?
Yeah, I got them. Yeah, I'll start there. Our first question is really a comment by Steve Nisbet. He said that he disagrees with your statement that the current LWR licensing process has plenty of flexibility. He said he guessed it depends on your definition of plenty. For existing LWRs, He thinks that the NRC too often treats guidance and precedents as requirements. He said, like you, he's hopeful that new reactors will experience increased flexibility. I'm not sure if you need to rebut that.
I would suggest that the lack of flexibility is in the evolution of regulatory practice rather than in the regulations themselves. But you know, that I guess that's subject to it's a subjective matter how people view that. So
Yeah, it's a throwaway comment, Prasad. It's just you know, I'm not convinced we're where we need to be in the LWR world either. That's all. But no need to go into that any further.
okay,
Well,
thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Our next question is from Robert Florian, and it's kind of a multi-part question. The first one is, will application of the standard replace deterministic safety analysis? Currently with regulatory guides 1.174 and 1.177, we can only use insights.
Well, the ANS-30.3 enables you to use anything that you want to do and offer. It offers a way to accomplish what you want to accomplish for each of the subject areas covered. So I'm not very familiar with the specifics of those reg guides that you mentioned. So I'm sorry, but I can't give you a yes or no answer to the question.
We'll give you the part two to that then. So he adds, to fully benefit from the standard, do you intend to have the NRC revise regulations to have performance-based requirements?
Well, I'm suggesting that the precedent set in the functional containment area is a basis for saying that one can make the arguments for adequate safety margin for any of the regulations where the performance criterion is identified clearly. So I mean, the whole idea is to really break down compliance into what it takes to meet the performance objective rather than either the regulatory practice or to, in some instances, to specific wording where it's open to interpretation, such as important to safety or safety related, and all these terms. They have such a wide range of interpretation that I think it makes more sense to present the performance objective, make a solid safety case for accomplishing the objective. That what it takes is you state your claim, you present your arguments, and you offer the evidence that you're accomplishing what you claim you can accomplish. So I think in that kind of a formal framework, the NRC would be quite receptive to using a performance-based approach. I hope I answered the question. Next, shall we move on? Because
So the next one is from Brandon Chisholm, and it's regarding slide 12, which we're viewing right now. And he asks if there is a performance objective associated with the criterion.
Well, let's see. You have to go to the previous slide. Can we go back?
Sure.
Yeah. See, this is the relationship between a performance objective and a criterion. I'm suggesting that there is an anatomy associated with a performance objective where you are seeking to specify a requirement. Now, a requirement, is what it takes for a project to go procure stuff and to put things together, to assemble, to build, and to have a construction. So all these things need requirements, and any given requirement really is based on setting a criterion that separates acceptance from being acceptable and not being acceptable. So what in part 52, what is called ITAC, the inspection test acceptance criteria, that acceptance criterion is based on having a performance objective, and I'm suggesting that that line over there is the next slide. If you go to slide 12. Yeah, so that performance criterion is what you have set in your ITAC. That's the connection I'm making to the regulation. Brandon, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Great. We're going to go on then to the question by Frank Hope. He asked if you can explain how NRC endorsement of ANS-30.3 would help an existing licensee.
I would refer you to Lana Lawrence's community of practice in August of 2023, rather than go through it. I think she has explained, a lot about how risk-informed performance-based approaches can be used by operating reactors. So, next question.
Yeah. And just so you know, we did provide the link to the Community of Practice webpage. If you go on there, just scan down and you'll find all of the Community of Practice links to the recording and just the presentations as well. So we've got one more question right now for Prasad, and it's from Ian Jung. And he asks if you are suggesting in your last slide, in the example of the molten salt reactor, used that this LWR standard to be used for non-LWRs. For non-LWRs, Red Guide 1.233 has been endorsed by NEI 1804 for the RIPB approach to inform licensing basis of a plant design. So we'll go. I'm gonna get back to that.
Basically, Ian, I'm saying that Red Guide 1.233, endorses a wide range of risk-informed performance-based approaches, and NEI 1804 is one specific one that it endorses. But what we have requested NRC staff to do in reviewing ANS 30.3 is to make ANS 30.3 as one of the references for Reg Guide 1.233, and that would enable the technology inclusive aspects of 30.3 to be employed for each of the different sections that Reg Guide 1.233 covers. So, does that answer your question, Ian?
I see that your point. But I think that clarifies what you're thinking there, and appreciate it.
Sure.
I think we've got just a couple more minutes.
Yeah, are there any other questions? I'm sorry if I rushed through a lot of this, but um, if you have further questions or comments, please feel free to, send them to Pat or myself. Um, I do want to acknowledge at this point the great deal of help that Bob Youngblood and Kent Welter have given me in terms of preparing this presentation and supporting me through this whole thing. So with that, I think to stay within the hour that we allow for these presentations. I want to thank everybody for tuning in and participating. And, thank you very much, Pat. I think we can conclude this community of practice.
Thank you very much, Prasad, as well as all of our participants. And you all have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.